This is the Book 1 recap from Tabletop Legends. Now, Delve Requisite. Egeria, the continent of Orahol and the Five Kingdoms. Civilization built on the crumbling ruins of that which came before. Governments, kingdoms, and independent organizations all vie for power over one another, often over relics of the fallen Invarian Empire, lost for a millennia. On the front lines of these titanic clashes are the Relic Hunters, a unique brand of adventurer who risk life and limb to retrieve these long-forgotten pieces of history and bring them back into the light. Our story began as 6 disparate individuals were brought together from several far-flung regions across the Five Kingdoms, and offered a chance at a job, and at something more. Abraham Bram Repluck, Nuala Shoreheart, Alar Cabot Jr., Kellen Forzair, Walter Gray, and Osrius No-Name Madrokia were all gathered by one Torian Idrian, a mage and talent scout of sorts for the Ordinum Libri, the Bookkeepers, protectors of knowledge and arcana free of any one government's control. Idrian, claiming to be rendering his services independent of his work for the Bookkeepers, as a favor to an unnamed potential employer, explained that based on their history and unique skill sets, he had tracked each of the 6 down for the purpose of recruiting them for a chance of securing a long-term Relic Hunter's contract, hinting strongly to each individual that his offer held opportunity to open the way for each of them to find something else that they were personally in search of. As a working interview of sorts, Idrian assembled the group just outside a small town in the northern portion of the human kingdom of Mithlande, where he explained that there had been strange occurrences reported in and around a sleepy town of Stone Mill, and it seemed possible that there was magic afoot. Their task was to investigate, recover whatever relic might be at the end of their mystery, and return it safely to an address he provided in Mithlande's capital city of Niveria. The group made their way to Stone Mill, where they immediately ran afoul of the Mithlindian Home Guard, under the command of an inquisitor by the name of Lyanna Highhaven, who were already in the area investigating the trouble. Undeterred by the Home Guard's blockade of the main caravan trail, and insistence that no one enter or leave the town until their investigation was completed, the group talked their way into the town anyway, and began an investigation of their own. The group's investigation led them all around the town of Stone Mill, where they learned that a series of attacks and strange sightings, most recently culminating in the break-in and abduction of a young girl in the night, had the entire town on edge. Their relationship with the Inquisitor and her people continued to grow more contentious as the party continued to investigate, despite repeated warnings not to. They also encountered another group of relic hunters, calling themselves Rogers and the Boys in the area, attempting to snap up any potential relics for themselves. Eventually, things came to a head after the Inquisitor's heavy-handed approach to controlling the situation nearly led to the village's only dwarven resident, the sextant of the small temple, to be attacked by a mob under suspicion that he was behind the attacks, only to be saved by 2 of the party, whom she had arrested the previous night. She was then forced to admit that she did not have enough men and women or enough information to be turning away the party's offer to help. After this turning point, the group began to work alongside Inquisitor Highhaven rather than against her. They were able to confirm that the attacks were being carried out by undead creatures, specifically the reanimated corpses of long-entombed ancient dwarves. By cooperating with the sextant, the party were able to gain access to a dwarven crypt in the town's graveyard. This was not the source of the undead, but it allowed them to piece together the location of a larger crypt in the woods atop a nearby mountain range. With the attacks becoming more frequent, and several of her soldiers injured, making just defending the town's outskirts from wandering undead difficult, the Inquisitor agreed to let the party seek out the tomb and the source of the undead on her behalf. They did so, eventually locating the entrance to the tomb, partially buried at the back of a cave up a rocky mountain slope. They worked their way down into the twisting multi-level crypt, fighting undead and searching chambers until they reached the bottom. Here, they discovered the missing girl from the village, alive and more or less well, in the company of a creature unlike any they had seen before. One large eye and a frail, decrepit body, it clutched a long wand of blackened wood in one hand, and seemed strangely protective of the young girl. The group had a brief discussion with it, attempting to negotiate. They learned that it had come to this place and found the wand. The young girl believed that this wand was what was making the undead rise and obey the creature's will, but she didn't think it understood what it was doing. The creature was insane, barely lucid, and obsessed with finding magical items and knowledge. It seemed to be seeking the solution to some question that it couldn't explain. Eventually, the creature gave in to its paranoia and madness, and attacked. It assaulted the group psychically, whispering deep, dark secrets into their mind, and attempting to rake them with its claws. They succeeded in slaying it, retrieving the girl and the relic, and went to leave the tomb. It was on their way out that Brahm nearly died when they encountered an undead that they had bypassed on their way down. The magic from the black wand already fading, the undead creatures were beginning to become sluggish and inert, but they remained dangerous enough that one nearly killed Brahm. If not for lucky happenstance that he had made an offering at a shrine to a dwarven deity in the tomb earlier, he likely would have died on the spot. As it was, he was granted a vision of a strange kind of limbo, where an uncountable number of souls screamed out their anguish at being trapped, before a light from a very far-away place seemed to use up the last of its warmth to pull him back to the land of the living, where Nula was able to revive him by laying on hands. The party returned to the village and informed the Inquisitor of the monster, and that they had put an end to the threat, but neglected to tell her about the Black Wand, mistrusting the Mithlindian government with it, and deciding to at least look into the identity of this mystery employer who had brought them here. They returned the girl safely home to her mother, and would have had more time to stay as heroes of the town, if not for the fact that Rogers and the boys had taken the opportunity while everyone was distracted with the undead to rob the crypt in town and make off with a magical item that had been contained within. The party made a promise to the sextant to retrieve the item and return it to him so that it could be put back in its proper resting place, and they set off to give chase with a purchased cart and a draft horse named Henrietta that they obtained with the coin the Inquisitor had requisitioned as a reward for their service. The journey took them south to the town of Woodpine, where they managed to catch up with Rogers and the boys by traveling long hours and through the night several times over during the course of their week-long journey. Their confrontation nearly ended in Rogers being killed in the altercation that broke out, but some quick action by the party saved his life. Grudgingly, the trio of relic hunters admitted that they had been bested and handed over the item that they had stolen, before both parties fled separately to avoid trouble with the law over their brawl. Meanwhile, Brahm was contacted by a mysterious individual who seemed to hold authority over him in some capacity. Brahm was given instructions to meet with a civil servant in Woodpine, collect something from him, and deliver it to one Cartwright Delker in Niveria. The group's journey the rest of the way to Niveria was not without incident. Walter, revealing that he was an employee of the Moxham Trading and Mercantile Company, and apparently one with some sway, secured passage on a barge down the Niverian River. All in all, the journey took nearly a month, and fall was coming to an end, giving way to the beginnings of winter when they finally arrived at the capital. The address that the group had been given, originally by Tori and Idrian, turned out to be the apartments of a trio of elderly wizards calling themselves the Collective of the Arcane Eye. Dimios Themerin, Namara Utumba, and Colin Copperkettle. We're past the days of adventuring and exploring for relics themselves, but were in the market for a group to do their fieldwork for them. Dedicated to the study of magic and its inherent good or evil nature, specifically as it related to finding ways to combat corrupting influences of some dark magic spells, the trio were interested in obtaining relics of a more malicious nature, so that they might study and neutralize them. The party, not sensing any ill intentions from the three, agreed to come on as their official relic hunting team, on retainer. They handed over the Black Wand to the Collective. Thus began their employment for the Collective of the Arcane Eye, and the birth of their officially registered relic hunting operation, the Fool's Errand. Osrius would leave the group at this point, to seek out something he was looking for elsewhere. Over the next year, the remaining 5 would take up residence in the Wizard's building, develop a close relationship with the trio, and their long-term servant, Stanfield. They undertook several missions for the group, in addition to pursuing their own personal tasks. Cartwright Delker, the recipient of Brom's odd delivery, turned out to be a member of the Mithlindian Parliament. Gaining access to the man by impersonating an aristocrat and his entourage and attending a gala in celebration of the man's daughter's 16th birthday at his estate, Brom was able to deliver his package. The information contained turned out to be reports showing concerning supply movements within the borders of Mithlinde's contentious neighbor, the Ignean Empire. Delker reacted strangely to this information, gave Brom a cryptic warning, and dismissed him. Kell made friends with an archivist at the Mithlindian Royal Library by the name of Bertram Flick, whom he discussed his quest for historical knowledge, specifically dragon lore, with. Flick agreed to help. On a job for Colin Copperkettle, the party would travel south to the village of Lagona to look in on an old colleague of the aging dwarf by the name of Bolus Trolleyweather, who had written describing a tome of particular interest he had come across, before dropping entirely out of contact. Here, the party discovered a terrifying series of events in which some sort of psychic thought creature had been released from the tome, taken over the house itself, and taken captive Trolleyweather and his entire staff, tormenting them and feeding on their anguish. The party fought through a house of horrors, which barely followed the laws of reality, as the creature's psychic powers bent the world to its whims. Nuala saved the day after falling unconscious and having some sort of a vision in which she saw her childhood friend Corey, whom she had been seeking for years, appear to her as an adult and deliver a message. Corey was cryptic but warned Nuala that something very bad was coming, and that they had to get stronger in order to stand a chance. She snapped Nuala out of the creature's psychic hold, warning her they are going to try again soon, before disappearing. Back on her feet, Nuala crushed the creature's physical manifestation with her hammer and freed the others, as well as Trolleyweather and his house staff. The party returned to Naviria with the deadly tome secured and a grateful Trolleyweather owing them a favor in the future. Upon their return to the city, the group would learn that Cartwright Delker was dead by apparent suicide mere days after their meeting. Brom would be tracked down by his daughter Tabitha, who suspected him of being involved somehow. She was convinced that her father had been assassinated, and that it had been covered up. He had been acting strangely ever since she had seen him take the meeting with Brom and the others at her birthday party, and now he was dead. Explaining that a ruby ring he always wore on his finger and never removed was missing when they found him, and was nowhere to be found. She was convinced of foul play. Brom managed to convince her that he had not killed her father, and had not been involved, and told her everything he knew about what he had delivered. Meanwhile, Kell received word from Archivist Flick, along with a forged pass under the name of Zeligot Dargans, to enter the full archives of the Royal Library. Flick informed Kell that he had looked into the dragon lore after their first conversation, and discovered something odd. He was convinced that someone was tampering with the archives, and removing material related to dragons for some reason. Unsure why this would be, or who might be involved, he decided to take Kell into his confidence. The two agreed to keep things quiet, and to try investigating further. Shaken by the death of Delker, the group discussed what had happened, and Brom fell under criticism for endangering the others through his secretive other job. He informed them that he worked for a group called the Brotherhood of Artanis. He was something of a courier and an occasional muscle. As far as he knew, the organization's purpose was to discreetly work for those with coin to pay to get things done that might be less than legal or perhaps morally disagreeable, but that the organization proclaimed to work always for the greater good. He assured them that he was not privy to any more information than he had already involved them in, and he was just as concerned as they were about what being tangled up in a political intrigue and potential assassination might mean. The group set off on their next contract for Dimios Themerin, and headed to the city of Odricholm in the northern kingdom of Voland. Their task was to meet up with a contract of Dimios's who had worked as an investigator for a private peacekeeping group in the city, and assist him on a missing persons case that he was working on and believed might have some sort of malignant arcane element. The group traveled to the city to discover that Dimios's contact, investigator Harkin, had been terminated from his position previously and had not been seen for some time. They followed a trail of clues about Harkin and the investigation he had been conducting, which had apparently gotten him fired, to a cheap brothel in the poor part of town. When they entered and began asking questions, they were attacked by a group of black-robed individuals and forced to fight their way out. Harkin himself arrived and joined the battle to aid the party, having been staking out this very location. Quickly, making an escape from the scene, Harkin and the party continued Harkin's investigation into the missing person together. They eventually uncovered a large operation involving a mad cult of apocalyptic prophesizers and self-abusive lunatics, and a group of powerful, dark magic users. Following a series of clues, questioning, the group managed to track down a hidden lair that the cult was using for its rituals. They discovered that the cult was using a relic, a strange shuttered lantern which emitted an evil green light that would either kill, drive insane, or imbue its victim with a dark power of some unknown purpose. They were then feeding the bodies of those who died into a massive, organic amalgamation of a creature. All of this was being done on the orders of a man who turned out to be one of the most powerful figures in the city. It was in this battle that Kellen Forzer was killed. The massive, organic slime monster, containing the biomatter and minds of every victim fed to it, killed and absorbed him. As it became apparent that the battle would likely result in the party destroying the creature, but not before suffering more casualties themselves, it used Kel's likeness, voice, and memories to parley with the group, informing them that it did not know what it was or how it had come to be. It knew only fear and madness as the cultists continued to feed it their victims. It explained that it possessed the biological imperative to continue its existence, and that it understood the concept of regret. It could not give Kel back to them, but it was willing to cease hostility, and it directed them towards the real mastermind, the city council person, Solomon Lazar. The party cornered Lazar and demanded answers. He told them condescendingly that they had no idea who he served and what the purpose of his work was and what the stakes were. The sacrifices they were making, he told them, were a minor, necessary evil, and that the salvation of the world was on the line. He told them the loss of the monster was unfortunate, but that the lantern was essential to his work. He offered to pay them off if they would give him the lantern and walk away. Before they could get further information, in an act of righteous fury, Nula struck down the man, ending his life in a single blow. Before he died, the group did get a name from him: Pendragon. They also found on his body a ruby-red ring, the same type as the one Cartwright Delker had worn. The bioorganic creature had used the opportunity of the party chasing Lazar to escape, slithering through tiny cracks in the floor and disappearing. The party did retrieve the lantern, bid farewell to Harkin, and returned to Naviria to mourn the loss of their companion. Things grew complicated for the party. On top of the loss of their friend and traveling companion, the Fools Errant found themselves skirting the edges of something. Something larger than a few relic hunters doing jobs for a group of aging wizards. Something which seemed to be taking on the shape of a conspiracy spanning the kingdoms. Something perhaps on an even greater scale. From the start, after their bizarre convergence at the hands of Torian Idrian and his strange manipulative workings, events seemed to be falling one after another like dominoes. Twice now, members of the group had brushed against something just beyond the veil of death. A wrongness that had no explanation or context. A member of parliament in Mithlinday was assassinated under the guise of suicide mere days after meeting with the group. Someone with enough resources to wipe nearly all text referring to dragons from the largest library in the kingdoms outside of the hallowed halls of Terra Libra seemed to be doing so for some unknown reason. A vision of a childhood friend with a warning. Things are going to get bad. You need to get stronger. They're going to try again soon. And now, more than once connected with events taking place around the party. The Brotherhood of Artanis. After the loss of Kel, the wizards refrained from sending the group on any major or overly dangerous missions for several months. Instead, having the group do smaller jobs in ones and twos, mostly around the city. Some members took the opportunity to take some time off. Walter returned home to visit his wife and children in Valand, his obligation to the Moxham Company and his work for the Collective of the Arcane Eye having kept him away from home for some time. While home, he was contacted by Zavaran Moxham himself, and instructed to return to the place where they first met. Walter met with his employer and patron in the dead of night, at the cemetery where he had been a gravedigger years ago. Moxham, strange, difficult to pinpoint his age or race, walked with Walter, and praised him for the work he had been doing, how well he had grown to use the gifts he had been given. Moxham led Walter to an old mausoleum and pointed him to a bare patch on the ground just beside it. It was here that they had first met. Moxham told Walter that it was time he took the next steps towards greater power, that he could only hope to earn off his debt by becoming stronger and more capable, and that he was finally ready to take that step. Moxham buried Walter alive, and the enigmatic figure's true nature became more clear. Moxham is a lich, and Walter, in many ways, his unwilling thrall. Moxham performed a dark ritual in which Walter died beneath the soil, and passed into that same strange void between death and what lies beyond that Brahm had visited all those months ago. It was here, however, that Walter was transported to another place, and was approached by a female figure who called herself Maka. She delivered a cryptic message to him, similar to the information Corey had given Nula. She told him of darkness to come, and that the Lich was but a bit player in the larger story. Moxham's purpose, she told Walter, was to facilitate his journey. She was strangely apologetic, but in the end she delivered the same warning. They are going to try again soon. Back in Niveria, Tabitha Delker contacted the group again to inform them she had new information regarding her father and the Brotherhood. She had looked into the information Brahm gave her about the papers he had delivered to her father. She discovered that the morning he had been found dead, a set of documents which were found in the outbox of his desk were processed. Assuming he had completed them after hours the previous day, they were thought to be the last work he had done before taking his own life. Delker had managed to smuggle a copy of those papers out and showed them to the group, revealing reports which showed the exact opposite of the information that Brahm's delivery had. The papers that had been filed and sent on to Mithlinday's military advisors showed a de-escalation within the Ignean Empire. Tabitha was convinced that the Brotherhood had wanted her father to pass fake information onto the government, and that when he refused, they killed him and made it happen anyway. Concluding that someone was trying to pull the wool over the Mithlindian government's eyes about Ignean aggression, the group decided to proceed very carefully. However, Brahm had already inquired as to the fate of Cartwright Delker before suspicions of the Brotherhood or Artanis had fully mounted for the group. Brahm was given a message to meet with another operative of the Brotherhood shortly after speaking with Tabitha about her findings. A short, tense discussion ensued, in which Brahm confirmed that the Brotherhood had been responsible for assassinating Cartwright Delker. Brahm was subtly warned to stay out of things and to trust his orders. There had been a problem with Delker, and it was being dealt with. It was shortly after this that Tabitha Delker went missing. A young man from the stables at the estate came and delivered a pendant on a chain to the group, saying Tabitha had given it to him with instructions that should she ever go missing, he needed to bring it here. Namara activated a locating spell on the item, and the party rushed out the door to go to their rescue, only to run headlong into a goblin who asked them if their gnome had died recently. Fidget, a goblin obsessed with knowing things and reading the weave of fate, had encountered Osrius hundreds of miles from Niveria. He had shared his water with the Goliath, and his payment had been given a golden dwarven coin that Osrius had taken from the dwarven crypt. Fidget was granted a brief glimpse into the threads of fate intertwining through all beings. He saw the other members of the party. He saw Kel, and the result of his death severing lines of fate which were not meant to be severed. And he saw himself through his meeting with Osrius and this coin linked to the group. Fidget was shown a vision of the weave of fate connected to the party on a cosmic level, the brief glimpse of their destiny leading him to seek them out. Fidget fell into step with the group and joined them as they rushed off after Tabitha Delker. They found her, having been taken captive by the very same operative of the Brotherhood of Artanis that Brahm had spoken to. Brahm ended up killing the operative and sending a message to the Brotherhood that he was severing ties and would be coming for them. Tabitha Delker decided her only recourse was to attempt to speak to and seek asylum directly from King Roland Oldo, the King of Mithlinde. Eventually, the group all gathered back into Niveria. Fidget joined the fold, replacing Kel, and obsessing over following up on the young gnomish man's unfinished business. Eventually, as spring came, Namara approached the group about taking on a big mission again. They agreed it was time, and she sent them south to the kingdom of Honorand, home of the Free People and the barbarian tribes. There they were to investigate a place known by the locals in a small village as the Scarred Lands. It was a place where the land was supposedly warped and corrupted. The locals believed it to be inhabited by evil spirits, but Namara had heard of a similar case where an ancient Invarian ruin had begun to twist nature as the spells which maintained the place began to fail after centuries. Thinking it was possible this was a similar situation, the party was dispatched to investigate. Simply getting to the village where the locals might direct them to the Scarred Lands was a journey that took over a month. The party fended off a wild griffin attack, found evidence of a Mithlindian patrol having been slaughtered by an unknown enemy in the wilderness, celebrated the Festival of Green Grass in an Honorandan village called Wolfmaw, where Fidget won a prized Sindam Akalteke horse. They aided the villagers in Malacca with a were-tiger problem, all before finally being taken to the Scarred Lands. The Scarred Lands turned out to be a small corner of a valley where the ground, trees, and animals were all twisted and strange. They followed the source of this strangeness to a crevasse which led deep underground. Before even setting foot beneath the surface, however, they were attacked by a massive creature resembling an undead canine the size of an owlbear. They fended the creature off and descended to find a long-buried Invarian research station. As they delved deeper, it became apparent that the Invarians had been tampering with time magic to research some sort of history-altering find they had made below. A calamity had struck, which resulted in the entire facility becoming a scar in time. The party saw echoes of the past from when the facility was new, and learned that the Invarians had found some sort of vessel, like a sailing ship, lodged deep below the earth, which they estimated predated even their own history. There had been an earthquake, which had damaged the arcane device powering their attempts at chronomancy, and caused the destruction of the facility. The monsters the party had been fighting all the way down were the time-displaced remnants of the researchers, as well as the creatures that had been caught in the blast. The party managed to find and shut down the arcane device which had been frozen in time for thousands of years, healing the Scarred Lands and making the discovery of a lifetime. Not only a fully intact Invarian ruin, but a mysterious sailing vessel, deep underground, which predated even the Empire. Perhaps most importantly, though maybe only to Nula, a blink dog puppy, which had been frozen in time along with the damaged arcane device since the time of the calamity. Using magic to get themselves deeper into the vessel, even than the Invarians seemed to have gone, they found a strange metal golem in pieces in one of the corridors, and a crystal or gem of some kind, the size of a wagon, at the center of the ship's hold. The group brought all of this information, including the arcane coordinates for an intact teleportation circle, back to the wizards. The magnitude of what they had recovered prompted the Collective of the Arcane Eye to contact the bookkeepers. As rightful claimants of the find, since the Fool's Errand had made the discovery on their charter, the three wizards were in a position to ask for nearly anything they might want in exchange for the find. Much to the dismay of some of the party, what they decided to ask for was admittance into the bookkeepers, as this had ultimately been the goal of their life's work from the start. In order to assuage some of the angrier members of the group that they had received so little for the find, the Collective agreed to negotiate admittance into the bookkeepers as relic hunters for them, in addition to compensation in the form of unique magical items, as well as a percentage of profit from future developments made from the Ordinum study of the site. The party sat in on the negotiation between the Collective of the Arcane Eye and a representative from the Ordinum. Also in attendance were Torian Idrian and Santiago Sanchez. It became clear that Idrian, somehow having predicted that admittance into the Ordinum for the Fool's Errand would be part of the negotiation, brought Santiago Sanchez to serve as an administrator on an evaluation mission. All other terms agreed upon, so long as the Fool's Errand could complete a contract on the Ordinum's behalf with Santiago to aid and evaluate them, they would be admitted. The group was sent to help settle an upset at the Great Excavation, an area within Niviria's walls where the part of the city had collapsed, revealing original Ignean ruins, Invarian ruins beneath, leading to a massive archaeological effort. Recently, 2 archaeologists had been trapped inside after a new chamber had been opened, and something caused giant spiders, scorpions, and elemental creatures to go berserk, forcing all of the workers out of the tunnels. The city guard were doing their best to keep the creatures contained inside and underground, but if the issue wasn't resolved, the Home Guard would be deployed in force to deal with the issue. Desiring a more delicate approach within the precious historical site, the royal archaeologist had contracted the bookkeepers to deal with the matter. The party battled their way through giant spiders, scorpions, and elementals, following the trail of the lost archaeologists, and eventually made their way into the newly opened portion of the underground complex. They destroyed a stone and crystal golem, apparently left behind by the Invarians as part of a defense system for a massive door, which seemed to have been the source of the agitation for the monsters. They then had to solve a series of complicated mechanisms, sealing a series of doors leading down a path heading deeper underground towards the center of the city. It was there they located the 2 lost archaeologists in a massive chamber, which the group speculated was directly beneath a structure in the center of the city called the Star Spire, a surviving tower from the original Invarian Empire. Inside the chamber was a massive dome-shaped object, though the entire place seemed inert, and there was no way of knowing what the structure was. Fidget, presented with another of his premonitions, told Walter that this place seemed important for them. But this wasn't the right time. They would come back someday. The Fool's Errand bid farewell to Santiago Sanchez, who informed him he would pass along their excellent performance to the Ordinum's relic hunting division. Over the next few weeks, the wizards packed up their belongings, broke down their arcane sanctum and laboratory, and prepared to make the move to Terra Libra. The group found themselves in a unique position, and tensions began to rise once more. Their contract with the Collective of the Arcane Eye was complete. Now they would need to decide what they would do next. The obvious first step to most of the group was to travel to Terra Libra, collect their rewards, make use of the resources now open to them to do a little bit of research, and perhaps gather their plan for how to approach one of the troubling situations they found themselves caught up in, or otherwise find work doing more relic hunting jobs to earn coin. While most of the group felt this was the right move, Fidget firmly set his stance against going anywhere near Terra Libra or the Ordinum. Things came to a head as the group found themselves on the eve of the wizards leaving via caravan for Terra Libra, with the internal argument amongst themselves still unresolved. The fate of the Fool's Errant hangs in the balance at the end of Book 1 of their saga. And as our tale transitions from its original form as Tabletop Legends, and we move into Book 2, please join us as we continue the story of Delve Requisite.